Hey kid, you want to hear about the opinions of people on some anime? That's what the algorithm says you want. Here's me, I'm Talen Lee, he, him, and this is Fox Lee.
I'm an animation enthusiast goblin wife, and a she, her.
And this month, instead of let's playing our way through a classic 90s point-and-click adventure game, which, don't get me wrong, we're gonna get back to that. I don't get out of this year without doing Loom, alright? We are gonna find a way to make that happen.
I got him this time!
But we thought, based entirely on the fact that I want to, we should instead spend this time talking about the anime we watched in 2023.
I mean, we watched it anyway, we may as well monetize that enthusiasm.
This channel isn't monetized.
We may as well contentify that enthusiasm. Yeah, saved it.
This is especially funny because my day one post for the year was a message saying, I'm not going to call my stuff content this year.
Hey, you can't make any promises for this rabble.
It's true. You are a disorganized horde. It's very much a thing. So, let me lay some of the groundwork here. The past couple of years, possibly after a large event made us all stay inside for a while, Fox and I got back into watching media together more. Part of that was we watched a whole bunch of Disney movies, and then, I think, as almost a direct follow-on of, enjoying watching things together and talking about stuff together, we started back on our hobby of watching anime.
That was definitely a important element of it. There was also just getting really kind of fucking sick of paying too much money for streaming services that promised to charge us even more going forward because they could. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, this just heralded our interest in watching anime again. I don't know why I bring it up. It's clearly not related in any way or legal form.
In Minecraft. Anyway, the follow-on from that is that we spent 2023 watching a lot of anime. Now, the way I like to watch anime is I like to have the season or series done so I can watch as much of it as I want to without feeling I need to hang on week to week. I don't like that pressure.
I have never been a fan of watching stuff serialized. I think it comes out of living in Australia and therefore having the TV schedule of stuff just being fucked up a lot of the time for no apparent reason.
Sometimes just random. Just random!
And if it did actually appear regularly and in order, it was gonna be at least 6 months after the hype for it was out online, at least at the point where there was online.
Mm-hmm. And, we're just not big TV people.
No.
Just haven't been TV people for pretty much the entirety of our married life.
Literally don't have a TV antenna connected and haven't had for 20 years.
Yeah. So, we watched a lot of anime last year that was, effectively, the previous year. We'd find what seasons were complete, and we'd watch them once they were over, which meant that in 2023, we did watch some 2023 anime, but we also watched a lot of 2022 anime. And that's what prompted last year's video of, goodness gracious, 2022 was amazing for waifus, which also had as a direct follow-on from that, my thesis that 2022 was a particular outlier year for quality and presentation in anime. And I, in the early parts of this year, more or less said to Fox, it's really weird. I think that 2023 is the proof that 2022 is a standout, because 2023's anime kinda sucks. Which prompted a sort of back and forth. I don't think it's unfair to say that you gave me some pushback on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's such a gulf in quality as you believe there is.
No, I definitely think I'm being a little extra harsh. But I do think that 2022's highlights are very strong, and 2023's highlights are fine, and that's a very different kind of character, and this meant that on dog walks, with our dog, who, by the way, has no opinion on anime, except that he should be allowed to bark during it, we wound up talking about this, and I thought, you know what, I would like to record this somewhere. I think that this is an interesting kind of discussion form, and I think that there's a vision of anime media on YouTube that exists not directly, but in concert with a sort of advertising cycle. You should be involved.
Oh, hell yes.
And the problem is, anime is just fundamentally already ads, and that means that you kind of are watching ads for ads, whereas in this case, what we're not doing is trying to get you hyped for a new thing, but rather, hey, go check out this old thing. here's what we thought of it, and here is how we reacted to it emotionally.
I do really enjoy doing this after all of the hype has passed, because I am very defiant towards the hype cycle. I find hype culture exhausting and shitty and destructive, and I don't ever want to be a part of it. But I love looking at these things in hindsight and going, fuck yeah, that was great. If you didn't check that out, that is worth having a look at.
And it's also a fun thing about anime itself, in that the nature of how anime gets made and budgets and whatnot means that there is a strong incentive for a franchise to have a good first few episodes.
Speaking of why the hype cycle is destructive.
And then can trail off. Years ago, I joked about the idea that if I said if I didn't like an anime because it had a bad ending, I wouldn't like any anime. Because, broadly speaking, it was a very easy generalization to make that anime didn't end well.
Yeah, I've got to agree. I can still only think of... not even anime. Series in general, I can very rarely think of something I think had a good ending. You have very unusual cases where a series was genuinely planned out the entire way from the start, and I think you can really tell when that happens, because even if you don't necessarily like how it ended, it at least feels correct. But that's not usually what happens. Usually things peter out. Usually things lose their steam. Usually things get disappointing. It's not that I was very into the X-Files in the 90s and got just the baddest burn of my life, and I have never been the same since.
And as an orientation point, I think that, for example, Evangelion, the original series, has a good conclusion. It has a good ending.
I do. I like the original ending to Evangelion.
But also, undeniably, that ending isn't how they wanted to present that end. Budget stuff happened. The ending was a bit weaker than they wanted to do it, even if the story direction they went in was what they wanted.
Absolutely.
And so that's what And like I've glibly said, the ending of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is just dudes doing wave motion beam cannons at one another, which simplifies things to an incorrect degree, but it's also not wrong.
I really like the resolution of Brotherhood, actually. Yeah. I don't love the time leading up to it, like shifting focus from which characters are important and how time is drawn out just because you're building up to a conclusion.
Yeah.
But the ending itself I do enjoy. For endings that I just think are good and correct and that's how it should have ended. Vandred ended brilliantly.
Yeah.
And Summertime Render ended brilliantly.
First mention of Summertime Render.
There's not a lot else in that space. That might be it.
I have...
Durara had like 4 good endings.
And I have... if we're just throwing out anime we think ended well, I have the ultimate cheat, Monster.
Ooh. Speaking of things that were planned out right from the start, and they went exactly with that Monster. Anything Naoki Urasawa has written, frankly, is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's your hallmarks. Like I'm the kind of person who thinks Evangelion and Monster both have good endings. So from there, extrapolate what you will. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the anime from 2023 we watched together, and some we didn't quite watch together, but stuff. And we're going to start, rather than try to bollocks you into watching a whole video to get to the end of a list, we're just going to start with the stuff we thought was good.
We'll start with the good shit, alright. High notes right from the start.
And what's more, the stuff we're starting with, we're also just sorting it by release date. Tier lists are fun, but man, F that.
I wonder now if I would have rather to put this on a tier list just because that would help me sort out my complicated feelings towards some of the mid-range entries, we'll say.
What? Mid-anime from 2023?
We'll put a pin in that for later, I guess.
So, starting out, first of all, in January with a Netflix release, Way of the Househusband.
Oh, this is great!
So I think this one's my fault. I brought this into our lives.
Yes, definitely. This wasn't on my radar at all until I was putting together the list of things to find legal viewing locations for.
Yeah.
And it totally blindsided me, but it's so much fun. It is fantastically, spectacularly cheap. It is amazing to watch. It does not give a fuck about your idea of what a show's budget should represent in terms of, like, animation quality or effort. And for a series like this specifically, that works in its favor. It's hilarious.
Hey, Fox, what's the pitch of Way of the House Husband?
Oh yeah, we should talk about that, I guess. It's a Yakuza show. Except it's not a Yakuza show because he's not a Yakuza anymore. He is just a regular old house husband.
Yep.
But he's gonna be the best goddamn, most capable, most honorable, most triumphant house husband there ever was, because his wife is just the fucking best.
Yes.
And she deserves everything.
This is a detail I was going to get to when we went into this series, which is with the central premise of, like, it's a former Yakuza just doing mundane house husband stuff. Which is simple, hilarious, it's great, they've got a great sense of comic timing and all that.
Like, in a very Yakuza way.
Oh,
Everything
yes.
is contextualized in, this is what this would be like if it was in, like, a gang situation.
Yeah, and he's, like, useless at communicating in conventionally polite ways.
Yes.
But this is fundamentally a wife guy series. This is a guy whose defining characteristic, even though he is also, like, a terrible badass and a successful Yakuza member at one point, the defining trait of him is, I love my wife. And normally, wife guy media tends to have the wife be kind of either, like, an ethereal construct or comedically shit. And in Way of the House Husband, no, she's just great. Like, the pitch of this guy gave up his life in the Yakuza to dedicate himself to cleaning her pots and pans. And, like, yeah, no, that makes sense. She's that good. This is great. The worst thing about her is she likes cop anime, but, you know.
Yeah, it's, mention of summertime rendering number two. It's very rare that a show pitches me, this is the best girl imaginable.
Yeah.
And then manages to follow up on that in a way that makes me go, she fucking is. You know what?
Yeah, dead right.
And Miku she's great.
Mm-hmm.
She's very great.
Number 2 in our list, Skip and Loafer.
This is probably, if there was a tier list, this would be number 1, I think.
Yeah.
The way I laughed at this show is something I don't often get to feel.
What's
from
Skip
anime.
and Loafer about, Fox?
Skip and Loafer is a fucking school romance anime.
I know,
it's about a small town girl who works way too hard and a big city boy with a complicated famous past who doesn't work nearly hard enough. And it sounds like the most boring shit imaginable. But, like, every person in this is great and lovely and so much more interesting than the surface level treatment of their personality suggests. Like, at the point where there's a girl in, like, the opening episode who is obviously set up to be that bitch.
Yeah.
Like, she's so pretty, everyone in class hates her, she obviously, can have whatever guy she wants, and there's this quiet tone of resentment around her. And then you find out she's just nice. She's just nice. And people just kind of have the shits about her and assume that she is the worst.
Yeah.
But she's not. She's lovely. She goes out of her way to care for someone who is not fitting in. She's just nice.
So, I don't want to dwell on this because it would actually involve, like, pulling apart the show, which isn't really necessary, but you called it a high school romance anime, and I definitely agree it uses that structure. But,
yes,
yeah.
I understand that because this doesn't nearly finish the plot of the source material. Still comes to a very satisfying conclusion within its arc, so it does not get the disappointing ending ding.
But if you went into this going, when are they gonna kiss? It doesn't happen in the anime. Instead, it is the structure of a romance anime of, like, I am a high schooler, I am surrounded by people, I am building relationships, and I am finding myself having emotional reactions to this stuff. It uses that structure with just some of the best people. They're so nice, it's so lovely, it's charming, it's sweet. The opening song is a banger.
Oh, the animation is so lovely. It's, like, it's broadly shoujo style, which often doesn't translate very nicely to screen. Because
and like, understated shoujo, not like the heavily hyper-detailed shoujo.
Yeah, well, that's what shoujo normally is by the time it reaches an animation cell, because the kind of, like, intricate line work that characterizes it, you can't do in a show. You can get closer these days, like, you've got a lot more detailed sort of eye styles and a lot more detailed shading and stuff, because that layer of CG over the traditional animation lets you do that kind of shit. The 3D
animation door is opening up, and I'm just leaning on it to keep it closed.
Hey, but yes, CG can be used to complement 2D animation beautifully. You will not find me arguing with that.
But yeah, so Skip and Loafer looks gorgeous. in its really understated, slightly scuffed style.
The animation is so expressive. Yeah, it's quite simplistically rendered. It's we talked about do it yourself last year, which has a similar kind of thing. It is simple by choice, not by limitation.
Yeah.
And that works beautifully for this show because at its core, this is a show about a character who is important because she proceeds through these complicated things with a simple attitude.
Yeah.
And this is the right way to visually tell that person's story.
Yeah. The other thing I would say that deserves like special mention about Skip and Loafer that's not just like, hey, this is a good anime that feels good to watch. Like the other thing that deserves special attention is the absolute respect the narrative treats the main character's trans aunt.
I was gonna bring her up as well, yeah.
Yeah. There are conversations that trans people have to have around family and friends. Like, are your friends going to be cool? And that stuff happens in this. There's no denial of identity. There is stuff which, like, you might conventionally say, like, well, hey, they address this person in a rude way, but instead it's just, like, the very normal lived experience of, like, oh, yeah, I need to clarify a detail that you might not have, and we need to do this in a way that's, like, handled. But no one kicks up a fuss, no one stirs things up, but also the fact that there's this trans woman, the language around such things in Japanese is more complex and nuanced than English necessarily has. So I'm just going to use trans woman, but understand I am blanketing over something here.
If she were non-binary, they would have reduced it to a simple trans woman in the English translation anyway, I think.
Yeah, because Japanese relationship to pronouns is very different.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point is, this character's relationship to their gender is part of their characterization. It isn't just there is a character who is trans, and that is thrown in there for comedy reasons. Like, this character's focus on presentation and performance and how you behave plays into her day job as a fashion designer. And, like, she's handled amazingly well. Obviously, as a cis person, I can't say, oh, I love how she was handled like it means something, but I didn't have the reflexive, oh no, I'm going to need to warn my friends before they watch this feeling that I often have to deal with.
I also like that they use that as a means for her to relate to one of the other characters.
Yeah.
Who is not herself trans, but has a lot of the same image issues going on, because her big thing is that she used to be fat, and she obsessed about this to the point of experiencing an eating disorder and completely fucking herself up to the degree that she's only just starting to get over now. And that's interesting to me because there's it's not an overlap, but there is an assonance between trans body dysphoria and the way that fat cis girls are made to feel about their bodies as well.
Look, the important thing is, if you're a woman, the culture has found a way to hate you.
It is. Doesn't even matter if you're a cis woman or a trans woman. The important thing is that if you're a woman, you will be made to hate yourself. I do want to just put a little pin in here for Shimasosuke,
the dog?
our lead boy.
Oh.
Yes. Just being the cutest fucking thing, and, like, very early on, there is a scene where the main character, in her way of just, saying what's on her mind because she's a straight-talking country gal, mentions that he reminds her of her dog because his hair is, like, he's got tousled golden retriever boy hair, and he jokes that she could, scuffle him on the head if she wants, and she fucking does. She just goes for it. And I laughed at that in a way I have not laughed at any other anime in my life, I don't think. It just filled me with such delight.
Yeah.
The funniest fucking thing.
I must be getting old because I'm appreciating, slice of life teen romance comedies. Let's move on to something cool. What's up next? It's Insomniacs After School.
Oh no, oh shit!
Which, by the way, Insomniacs After School and Skip and Loafer first screened day after one another.
Oh really? Wow.
Yeah, so, like, if this was your jam, you're eating well. Did you want to give the pitch for Insomniacs? Because, like, I'm going to throw these at you no matter what, unless you stop me.
Okay. So Insomniacs After School is another high school teenage romance anime, but it has a really super different tone here, because the leads are definitely going to kiss.
Oh god, yeah.
If this was the real world, those leads definitely fucked several times.
Yeah, there's definitely some points where you're like, yeah, this is where people without their issues would have fucked.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad they didn't, because I don't necessarily want to have teenage characters getting it on in an anime.
Yeah.
But, on the other hand, I have been a teenager in this kind of scenario, and I know what happens.
Yeah.
But let's set that aside for a moment and actually give the summary. This is basically about two extremely normal brain teenagers, who, because...
For the benefit of the listener, what do you mean by normal brain? Because you're not just talking to me here.
Oh, I mean definitely not normal brain.
Yeah.
I mean that these people, probably are not naturally neurodivergent, but by virtue of their specific traumas, are extremely, exhibiting the symptoms of neurodivergence.
Yeah, one has a bereavement trauma that leads to insomnia, one has medical trauma that leads to insomnia.
Right, and because neither of them can sleep, they both wind up being dead to the fucking world during their school days on a regular basis, and finding the same sneaky spot to sneak away and catch some sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Until they immediately get found out by a teacher who's like, "Are you two fucking?" Fortunately, they're not fucking, but they do get roped into having to start up a school club to justify slipping off to this room for sneaky sleep. And it becomes a whole thing because it actually motivates our... The story is very much from the perspective of the male lead, which I guess is another major point of difference with Skip and Loafer.
Yeah. Skip and Loafer is about her. This is about him.
Yeah, and it's a very boy story. Like the narrative viewpoint and everything is very teenage boy in high school.
To be very mean-spirited to Insomniacs after school, which I want you to understand. I love this series. It's in my, I think it's one of the best series of the year, but to be mean-spirited to it, it is an anime about a boy who loses his mum and then finds out, what if the way you were traumatized by the loss of a woman in your life meant that you were relatable to the coolest girl in the world.
And to be unkind to Insomniacs, despite it being one of the best shows of the year, it definitely did not, in the way of Summertime Rendering Mention number 3, or Way of the House Husband, live up to the idea that this is just the bestest girl in the world. I see why she is for him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I politely disagree, but only in that she and he just fit together so well.
These two people are perfectly shaped for one another, and I wish them all the happiness in the world.
The late night broadcasting radio to you, telling you bedtime stories is
there's
like
some really fucking cute shit in here.
That is a brainworm. There's going to be some poor kids who are going to grow up to adults and realize, I never had a girl read me stories in high school about her anxieties. So did I ever really truly know romance? Like, that is so intense and intimate.
And part of what brings her down for me is the animation style once again.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more of an affect in how she's animated.
Yeah.
Her adorableness is much more of an act.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it literally actually is part of this character's damage, is that she is constantly trying to make everyone around her understand that she is fine and cool and totally happy, and they do not have to worry about her. So she's putting it on all the time.
A thing they de-emphasized from the base material, as I understand it, is that she's meant to be chubby, and that's meant to be a source of anxiety.
Yeah, see, they probably should have drawn that.
Well, she looks the same. But, like, apparently the source material has a bit more of the element of her being concerned about that fact, and the anime just like, oh, no.
It would have been worse if she brought it up, because they have not drawn her to be like, the art style of this show is a little thicker than your average extremely skinny anime girl, but that's true for everyone.
One other final detail about Insomniacs that I think is, like, noteworthy is the arcade is a real place.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
And it was heavily damaged in the earthquakes at the start of this year, and there's a fundraiser for it.
Oh,
yep.
That's also kind of neat.
Yeah, so just an interesting, like, anime is part of the real world.
Things that also brought Insomniacs down for me were that character in particular, because, like, I really enjoy the arcade owner as like a character pitch. She has, like, an extremely androgynous... I thought for sure we were going to get an actual non-binary character for once, but we did not.
No.
They definitely went she in the end. Though, once again, that could be on the translation more than on the original, I don't know. But they also seem to find it very funny that she was, like, obsessed with the idea that he was unreasonably horny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mostly towards the girl who was his obvious love interest, but like also to her, and it just felt very like, alright, they have an excuse. You're not a child anymore.
It reminded me a lot of Ranma 1/2, where a lot of people who are never horny are getting mad at what they assume is other people's horniness.
And I think it was supposed to represent that she just has like no experience with this, so she's constantly assuming that a guy standing next to her bra has done something wrong, even if it's her who put him there. But
man, it really sucks that this is the tone.
Yeah.
Because like, I love this series.
That is about... Yeah, well, and to end it on a high note, I would also like to highlight the end of this arc, where they, as like a club activity in the holidays, because apparently your school also gets to decide what you do in the holidays in this fucked up system, they wind up staying in a house in the country that belonged to her grandparents previously, and they're supposed to have her big sister with them the entire time. But because Big Sister is rad and she is wingmanning her little sister, she's just like, alright, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Do what you want. She thinks they're fucking for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, like, background. There's a lot of teenage horniness.
Yeah.
In a way that isn't gratuitous, which I really enjoyed because anime is very gratuitous about teenage horniness normally. And this show, despite having every opportunity to do that, and like I said, if they were real teenagers, it probably would have happened.
Yeah.
But the fact that it is, when they get to that point, treated with so much less just, what's the word? Sleaziness.
Yeah.
Than you would expect was kind of delightful. And also there's just a very real kind of, boy, I went back to us being teenagers. The first opportunities when our parents were staying away from home and stuff. Like, not that I want to TMI the listener or anything, but there is a definite kind of magic to the first chance you get to spend alone like actual fucking adults.
Yeah, and, like, making a meal for you for the first time.
Yeah.
The way they like, him making her dinner the night that they're on their own is shockingly hot.
Going out and shopping for the food for that meal
that's so
together.
Cool.
There's such a realness in that bit of this show, and that's what I really loved about it. That's how it connected with me in a way that I was not expecting.
Alright, well, that's altogether far too much, far too real, and far too close to my skin. So, let's move on to the next series, which we're finally getting some good old-fashioned shonen bullshit. Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead.
Oh, hey! This is another really pleasant surprise.
This was so much better than I thought it was going to be, and I thought it was going to be pretty good.
Like, I was really umming and ahhing about this. Like, the basic pitch, I love the basic pitch of this. If you don't know, the basic pitch is, what if the zombie apocalypse happened, but you were so fucking beat down and wrecked and completely traumatized by your shitty-ass day job that it was in fact liberating and incredible, and you realized that you had the chance to do anything you fucking wanted as long as you didn't die.
There is an interesting trend with anime where, what if instead of going to work, something terrible happened?
This is definitely the start of a trend we've noticed this year, which is work sucks.
Yeah, Zom 100 is the best at it, but yeah, work sucks. The idea of work as an inherent good is bad.
This is true of a lot of our school anime as well, because the underlying, like, going to school counts as work in this context, because the basic observation is like, what if this system gives people anxiety conditions?
Yes.
And sometimes also just kills them.
I kind of don't want to go too deep on anything in Zom 100, because, like, it's, for a start, it's broken into, like, 3 reasonably coherent arcs. It has, like, you don't have to watch all of Zom 1, like, there's no twist waiting for you at the end. There's no big twist surprise.
I was really afraid that there was, but yeah.
It's a fun show with the premise of living, not surviving, during a zombie apocalypse, and what that means and what you can then do with your life in that context, and then puts that at direct loggerheads with things like zombie monsters, the survivor mentality versus the living mentality.
Yeah, somebody who's been, like, trained to be a survivalist versus someone who's just deciding that they need to live.
Yeah, and, like, there's beer in the fridge. Well, the beer is not good survival food, so I'm not going to have it. It's like, yes, but I would like some beer. And passing
up on mochi.
Yeah.
Because it would be fattening.
Yeah, that's That's some brainworms. And the big culmination is the characters then being put in contrast with the much more dark, well, if there's no society, we live in a society, I will become the zombie Joker.
The characters you would have seen in a much worse show that was the show I was afraid this would be.
Yeah.
The show where it's just like, living to the fullest in the zombie apocalypse means following your worst instincts and treating everybody like shit and consuming everything you can for your own gratification.
Yeah, this, we have the apocalypse, let us now become Kaisers. It doesn't...
Your usual fascist power fantasy shit.
Yeah, and it goes, these guys would exist, and they would suck. So, hell with them. And it's a good time. The characters are great. The music absolutely kills.
The music is great. The animation is a fucking delight. It's so...
very wet.
But also just, it's so colourful. It looks like seeing an animation cell in person, which is different to looking at it on a screen, because the screen can't replicate the actual colours that it's been painted with.
Yeah.
It's really, really vibrant, in a way that serves the underlying tone of the piece excellently. It's exactly what you would want it to be. And also I love the use of, paint splatters and screen tone and, stupid comic book effects.
Yeah.
In place of gore and whatnot.
Yeah, the blood and gore in this is instead multicolored.
You're definitely gonna see some, zombies with eyeballs dripping out of their faces. It's not like the entire creature is rendered in a non-horrific way, but, whenever we've got, blood or spewing amounts of gore to deal with, it's just paint splatters.
One of the things I love about this technique of rendering blood in multiple different highly vibrant colors is that it underscores this isn't one single entity's blood.
Yeah.
It underscores the scope of things in a way that is, the series literally opens, the opening of the series animation has a massive back wall where the main character is dancing in front of that has written on it Memento Mori. This is not a subtle series about the stuff it wants to talk about.
Yeah, come to think of it, I will ding it for one thing, which is that it asserts many, many, many times in the opening dystopia, and it's not there's nothing dystopian about it, it's just an apocalypse.
Listen, I think that it's I think that it's a bit rich for any English speakers to give Japanese guff about how they use our language, because we weren't using it properly in the first place. Next up, and this is like a free square, Spy Family Season 2.
Spy Family! I love these two idiots and their perfect goblin daughter.
And in the contrast between 2022 and 2023, this is actually one of the funny things in that they cancel each other out, because they both had a season of Spy Family.
Yeah. And if anything, this one might be better.
I do think this is a better season, but it couldn't be without the first season. You needed the gag-a-week kind of vibe to get really settled in, and the half-size episodes, to the fact that this season has a 3-episode arc in the middle of it.
I'm so surprised, because they made a movie for Spy Family this season. And surely that would have been the thing to do the cruise ship for. It's perfectly movie-sized.
Yep.
But instead, it's, the second half of the season, and the movie is something else entirely.
Middle third.
Well, maybe the third quarter.
It's a delight. The pitch of Spy Family is you have 3 characters forming a family together. A father, a mother, and a child, except the father is actually secretly a spy for Faction A, the mother is secretly an assassin for Faction B, the child is a telepath, and their dog can see the future. So everyone has asymmetrical information, but also everyone involved likes one another and is good and cool. This could have been an angle for an extremely dark narrative, and instead it's about delightful goblin child getting to have a nice life.
I almost passed up Spy Family because the pitch sounded so edgy I thought I might die.
Yeah.
But I was not to know that, no, this is a comedy.
Yeah.
People leave that out when they talk about it. This is a comedy.
Yeah.
This is a romantic comedy about 2 gorgeous idiots who are both they're both 12 out of 10s. They're fantastic.
If there's any weak point of Spy Family, it's the presence of Yuki. And even then, Yuri. It's the presence of Yuri.
Oh yeah, Yuri's a creep.
And, like, even then, this season does actually go, yeah, he's a member of the Stasi, right? Like, you do understand, this guy's a Nazi police officer.
He is not cool. Everyone else is great. And they get a dog!
Yep.
Oh yeah, this is the better season because Bond is there the whole time. Yeah.
Important dog action. Alright, then the next season, and, like, if you're charting the calendar, you're like, wow, we're kind of ripping through the year here.
Well, we're only talking about the best stuff right now.
Yeah. Apothecary Diaries.
Ooh, this is one of the only shows where I went in going, I expect this to be great, and it was great. It did not disappoint me, it did not pleasantly surprise me, it was exactly as good as I wanted it to be, and I love it.
Amazing. What is it?
This is a story about a girl who is, well, she's an apothecary. She was raised by her dad, who was an old hermit apothecary, to be incredibly normal-brained, and that she worked at a high-end brothel for a long time, but definitely, like, as an apothecary, being very normal-brained and looking at all the other stuff that was going on and going, yeah, that's so, like, messy human shit-based. I get back to, like, potions and poisons and stuff.
Let me just, let me just slide in a short description first, which is to say, it's a crime procedural set in medieval China's imperial palace.
It's not actual China. It is definitely a fantasy version of very obviously China.
I thought it was actually...
And it's not historical.
Yeah, I thought it was. Anyway. But yeah...
Which is for the best. I mean, it might be only because they did not want to get into trouble for evoking any direct names or anything, which, I don't know, China has very strong opinions about dynastic stuff.
Yeah, and depicting actual Chinese emperors as kid doers.
Yes. Based on that pitch, yes, it is the story of how this girl gets pulled into this world by being kidnapped and basically sold off to be a servant in the concubine bit of the palace, so, like, indentured servitude, I guess, is technically, like, she can't leave.
No.
And, she's just basically like, this sucks, I can't do any of the shit I want to do.
And what is it you want to do?
I want to mess around with poisons and dead things.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a really funny bit later on where she's like, no, I can't do an autopsy, and the people around her are like, well, why? And she's like, because I was told that if I start messing around with bodies, I'm just gonna think that messing around with bodies is fine and normal to do all the time.
Yeah.
But my dad knew that would be a really bad path to go down. And he's not wrong. She would totally just, take a spleen if she needed one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this is the story of how an extremely pretty man recognizes that she has a talent for working shit out, especially where, like, poisons and plots and shit have been involved, and starts to put her to work doing that. And she kind of tries to fend this off at first because it is a lot of work. And she kind of just wants to keep her head down and fuck off as soon as she's able to. But, he works out that she's motivated by things like, well, you will get to mess around with this exotic poison and go hang out with the doctor and use all of his resources and stuff instead of having to, wash sheets and make beds and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we settle into this status quo where basically he brings her fun mysteries to work on. And, also tries to sort of woo her because he's the handsomest boy in the palace and everybody swoons about him even though he's meant to be a eunuch. I don't think he's a eunuch.
Well, there's only one of him.
Yeah, okay, anyway. Great show. It's so much fun. She's a brilliant character. She's just delightful to spend time around. Much like Skip and Loafer, the point of her is to have a very non-typical perspective in the environment she has been placed into, which in this case is like, courtesan, political, romantic intrigue, the whole, this is all technically about sex and having kids and whatever, but it's definitely also about just, if I'm the one who has the kid, then I'm the important one.
It is a series about power and sex from the perspective of someone who wants neither.
It is, and it is delightful for that. I will note that our boy, Jinchi, is, he gets very iffy sometimes.
Mm-hmm. But also, like, Imperial Prince, he was probably starting pretty shit.
Well, yes, and that's kind of how it goes. Like, he does start quite shit. Like, he comes on very strong because he is effectively entitled to admiration from anyone who likes a very good-looking boy.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he doesn't get it from her is a point of interest for him. And as you get to know more of him, and he's not putting on his, well, yes, I know everything that's happening at all times, because I am the smartest and prettiest boy, you realize he's actually kind of like a sulky little shit about it a lot of the time. And he's so much more fun once you find that.
Yeah.
And like, you know, something is developing between them in the long term, I'm sure. But all we get of it in this show is basically we get to the point where she genuinely has the chance to escape from the palace. And through multiple levels of misunderstanding, she does, and then everyone just realizes that they'd like to return to that previous status quo because it was fun solving mysteries together.
Yeah.
And making extremely asexual faces at other people.
Yeah, it's a really fun, good, honest mystery as well. Like, you can solve the mysteries ahead of time. It isn't something where they pull nonsense out of their butts.
Yes, if you ever don't solve the mystery, it's usually just because there is a person that you didn't particularly know before this point.
Yeah.
Or the attention wasn't brought to them when it would have been useful for you. But they play it really fair. There's no bullshit arseballs or anything like that. And a lot of it is pitched exactly at that point where you can work it out just at the right time to keep up your level of interest, but also be, rewarded for having worked it out and feel like you are, in fact, the smartest boy in the room.
Yeah.
Which is kind of exactly what you want out of a mystery show, right? You want to be able to work it out, but only at the last minute.
Yeah. Not everyone can approach mystery solving like Columbo does.
Have I already talked about the animation? This is another one where the animation is just fucking lovely.
Go to your Discord, press the GIF button, and type Apothecary Diary. And you will see a wealth of 2 to 3 second moments in this show that have been distilled into amazingly timed little animations.
Yeah. Our girl Mau Mau is very good for reaction GIFs.
Yeah, the becoming a cat and becoming infuriated with things. She's very good for that.
Which is also a pun, I'm sure, because her
yeah.
name is Mau Mau.
Yeah, Mao. I understand Mao is the Chinese pet word, like nickname for cat. But yeah,
I nod my head to Talen, assuming the reader will understand.
The reader.
Yeah, so that's about where I'm at. Also, fucking banger openings and endings on this.
Yeah, the opening is just a good song on its own. Like, I have downloaded it. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little weirdly out of type, because it's kind of about, what if she had a hidden, glamorous, sexy, dangerous side?
Yeah, it is very odd. And
I'm like, I kind of hope they're not going there in the long term, but I guess we'll find out.
Mm-hmm.
And the ending is just like a sincere love ballad with just a spectacular vocal performance with the little vocal fry at all the right points, and just very beautifully executed.
Speaking of banger OPs and EDs,
yeah,
Heavenly Delusion.
Oh yeah, these two songs were great as well.
Now I think this one falters slightly out of the general anime that was good. I think it's very fair to say that the first 10 episodes of Heavenly Delusion are great. And the Heavenly Delusion manga, which I have subsequently gone and read, I like a lot. But, undeniably, the last 2 episodes of Heavenly Delusion are kind of both a plot cul-de-sac. They don't do anything in the remaining episodes you've got to watch. And they don't answer the questions that you've got, brewing all through the series.
Yeah, it's kind of a huge bummer, because this was so good. What if it was there? It's so well executed. The quality is very high. The writing is excellent. I care very much about all of these characters. The mystery is interesting. And it just really badly needed 2 seasons.
Yeah, the last 2 episodes drive into a ditch.
Yeah.
And the worst part is, from the perspective of someone who's now read the manga, they had to swap some events around to make the series end where it did, instead of on a really sick monster fight.
Now, Talen, do you want to give us the quick pitch for this one, since we haven't summarized it yet?
Heavenly Delusion is a post-apocalyptic road trip story between 2 characters, a boy and a girl, who show through the course of this narrative that they are more than they seem, existing in a world that appears to be roughly now Japan, after a major cataclysmic event has ruined everything. Society has collapsed, but also everyone in the remaining spaces is still doing stuff. They are still living lives. They're still making colonies. This isn't a place where you're going to wind up like, ooh, is this town full of cannibals? It's not an American vision of post-apocalyptica. It's just, we lost all our infrastructure. We don't, like, cars are things that run on a precious material that you have to trade for.
And there's definitely a bit of that going on. Like, we have the usual sort of factionism and power struggles between different members to try and gain whatever control they have over whatever part of the population they have influence over. They don't lean too heavily into the nastiest kind of tropes for this, but they don't lean away from them either.
There is a teenage sex worker.
There is.
And, like, they don't show you a lot, but they do show you someone getting aggressively hit on by a teenage sex worker. And that's where the other thing comes up.
So he's at least also a teenager.
Yeah, it's absolutely. But, like, I would rather not see glamour shots of the 14-year-old sex worker. That's just something I would rather not. And that's where the other thing comes up, which is there is a second plot happening all the while of a high-tech facility called Heaven, where you have a group of androgynous children with superpowers and access to super tech, trying to work out both what's going on in their day-to-day lives, and discovering things like, why do I feel this way around this other person who hangs around in my school, and also, what's actually going on, and why do the adults all not want us to go outside?
Yeah, it's like a combination of weird hallucinatory kind of, is someone hacking the system to try and communicate with them and help them escape from this, or is this all just some kind of weird nonsense that's going on in their heads, and why is this place weirdly, unsettlingly sexless?
Yeah, and you know what? All this is covered in the manga. It's really good. It's a good story. I liked it a lot. And there's a revelation they could have put at the end of this anime that would have made the entire Heaven story arc make a lot more sense and made a rewatch really interesting. But they didn't include it because they wanted to make sure they got the plot point they did, which is where I get to my next point of irritation, which is they decide to pivot so the ending 2 episodes feature a bunch of sexual assaults.
Yeah, so we basically have the 2 storylines we're following, and they could have either given us some resolution to the weird sexless children scenario, or they could have given us some resolution to the romantic tension between our 2 road trip characters.
Yep.
And they chose the latter, which required them to follow through on the thread of the apparently female one of these 2 has been searching for a guy from her past this entire time. And it's become a point of tension between the 2 of them because the boy has a massive crush on her, and despite her having shot him down a couple of times and declaring that she is definitively a guy, this continues to sort of brew and develop, and there's an overall tone of jealousy towards this guy figure that it's pretty heavily implied that she was in love with, even if she was a boy.
I think it's fair to say that she looked up to him. And by the way, there's a reason we're using she, even though she says definitively I'm a guy.
It gets really
because she uses she.
Yeah.
But also, in the context of the show, she represents that, like, she's not all that invested in her body as a entity that is a female body, as we would conventionally pass it, because there's points where she's like, hey, I don't care about these boobs, I'll do you a trade if you want to touch my boobs. Which is weird.
She does freak out about it when it comes time to touch the boobs, though.
Yep.
Which is just very sort of typical, I don't care about my body. Wait, no, I really do care. That is how tough girls get written in a lot of anime.
Bodies are complicated, and our relationships to them are weird, and this is another thing that this series does that in the manga gets even more interesting. But do they do anything with it in the anime? No! Well,
they do a little bit with it in the anime, which is to say they come around to the point of boy road trip character going, look, I don't know how this really works out, and you are at this point having a big old crisis about it too, but I think what I understand now is that I'm not necessarily in love with the boy that you say you were, and I don't think I would have been in love with the girl that you say you got, merged into, but I am in love with the you that exists now. No matter who that is, or what bits make it up. And, that's a really cool resolution to have to that kind of romantic tension. But it does involve meeting this guy from her past that she's been hunting for the entire time and finding out he is the worst piece of shit in this whole show.
Yeah.
It gets coarse.
But, by the way, also, I don't know if I've mentioned, this is a Monster Fighter series. Like, every couple of episodes, there is a big,
Yeah.
interesting, exotically designed monster that you see them fight and that needs some degree of expertise in fighting that does weird or complicated things.
And they're all really cool.
And like, this is a show with sick martial arts and laser gun and monster fighting, and it's really, really enjoyable. But I just wish they'd executed the ending differently. So, like, this one's really good, asterisk. And the manga, very readable. You should check it out. I liked it a lot. It hasn't got to its ending either.
Still extremely content warnings for sexual assault, as I understand it.
Oh, yeah, it does still happen,
Yeah.
yes. But hence I say, like, they had to swap events around.
Yeah.
Like, there's a thing you learn before the sexual assault happens that recontextualizes everything you've seen in the story so far. And they decided, hey, instead of giving you an answer to a really complicated question, let's swap the other bit forward and leave that question unanswered. And it makes me so cross.
Wait, do you mean information about the road trip side of the story?
No!
Okay, we are talking about stuff they could have resolved in it. Yeah, I would have preferred to get the answers to that, just because that is, like, it's definitely the bigger part of it at this point. Like, it's the whole compelling mystery of the thing.
Yep.
And it connects to the mystery of who Road Trip Guy is in the first place as well.
Uh-huh.
Because that's the dangling thread that's going to bring these two stories together in the end.
Oh boy, howdy!
Yeah, and like, you know, they make that clear from the start. That's what it's meant to be, but they just, at the point where the story ends, the school kid characters have, like, just escaped because there was a huge disaster and shit blew up, and we just leave them just wandering around. It's going, oh, well, I guess we can go out here now. Let's poke around out here for a bit. And we see them poke around out there for a bit. But before anything substantial happens, we're just done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real kind of blue balls scenario. Yeah, it's kind of a heartbreaker. I do not know where to place this one in the end, because what is there is very good. But then there's a bunch of yikes, and the ending is just maddening.
I think that's one of the things for me that stands out about this season of anime in general across this year, which is I really liked bits of things. Very few of the things I watched did I like all of them.
That's fair.
One more to go in the, like, good basket. Just like the largely uncomplicatedly, hey, this is good and we enjoyed it. Overtake!
Overtake was a huge surprise.
What the hell?
Yeah, sports anime do not usually get me at the best of times. Like, there is only one Haikyuu.
Yeah.
Everything else is kind of just stupid. Even
Fox,
if it is good.
What's your second favorite sports anime? What's the sports anime you've got the most of?
Oh.
What's the sports anime you watched the most of?
It is 11.
Yes.
Which is stupid as hell. That show is dumb as rocks. It's for 6-year-olds, and you can tell.
I love it so much.
Really dumb.
I've never watched a full episode, but watching Fox watch Inazuma 11 is a beautiful thing, because you'll occasionally look up and she'll be like, what the hell is with penguins?
You'll be like, what's going on now? And I'll be like, oh, they added penguins to it, so it's stronger now.
Yeah, and this angel is fighting the alien.
Yeah.
This is a soccer anime.
That guy joined the aliens.
Oh, dear. So, Overtake is the kind of anime my dad would make if my dad didn't hate Japanese people.
This is a realistic car racing anime?
Set in the no one caresville of Formula 4.
I didn't even know there was anything other than Formula 1 until I saw this show.
I knew there were tiers of racing. I didn't know anything about Formula 4 before this point. And Formula 4 it looks a lot like Formula 1. Everything is a lot more low-key. Everything is a bit cheaper. Everything is a bit more approachable. It's a lot more like local sports teams.
Yeah, it's the perfect place to tell a story about car racing.
Yeah.
Because everything is just shit enough that there's wiggle room, right? Formula 1 is just the massive corporate car manufacturer that can throw the most money at this wins.
Yeah. Formula 1 is Ferrari, Ducati, BMW. It's all of the big multinational car corporations have teams, and no one else does.
In fact, I have the theory that the show is called Overtake because in this tier of racing, overtaking is normal.
Yeah, cars overtake. Yeah, for anyone who's curious about this, in my lifetime, I understand that there has been, I think, 3 times where someone has been overtaken for the lead of a Formula One race, and I'm not young. It's not a sport with, like, the conventional vision of a racing sport is you are trying to beat the person in front of you, and that's, like, how you progress. And, like, no, actually, that sport is largely how good are you on your pit stops, because that's the thing which will stop you from winning.
Can you do the entire race without fucking up?
Yeah.
Good. Then you come in whatever place you were in to start with.
Yeah, you come off the rank in the qualifying rounds, you maybe gain 2 or 3 spots in that early scrum, and that's it. That's settle in. That's where you're finishing the race. So Formula 4, on the other hand, is Formula 4 is financed on the scale of, like, a small business. Like, if you know someone who owns a grocery store franchise, that person could be financing a Formula 4 team.
In fact, that's the focus of our story. We have a plucky up-and-coming team owned by one guy who owns an auto garage.
Yeah.
And his son, who is, effectively carrying on the family business and has cute hair, and the son of their former friend who was himself a race car driver, and his kid wants to experience the elation that he once felt when his dad took him up on that podium, and it's been the driving force of his entire sweet little high school life.
But these are not our perspective character. Our perspective character is a photographer.
A photographer.
Again, this is the thing my dad would have made.
It's, So the pitch is we have a photographer who has lost his spark, as we find out later due to massive personal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Work sucks.
Yep, I know.
Sorry, that got me by surprise.
That's how you know I'm 40, the Blink-182 reference.
All the weasels.
Yep.
And he is thrown into just having a go at doing a photography gig at this racetrack by his profoundly understanding ex-wife and now boss, who's really just trying to help him get back into the game kind of thing, and it's constantly, throwing him lowball jobs to try and fix this. She's brilliant, by the way. I really like her.
Yeah, for a show about my ex-wife, I was so worried she was going to suck.
In fact, one of my favorite things about the show is the relationship between these two characters as one that is clearly, like, between 2 adults who had a romantic relationship and now do not, and that's fine, and still very obviously love one another in a non-romantic way.
Yeah.
It's a very mature kind of grown-up relationship that we just don't see in... Well, not even in anime, but just not in shows in general. Like, media is not interested in 2 adults occupying the same space unless they might fuck.
Yeah, and as a show in general, this is a very mature thing.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a lot of exciting, did more than 110%, pulled it out at the last second intensity. The kind of sport they're talking about is one where it's like you've got to avoid screwing up for 90 minutes to 2 hours, and that's the kind of tension it works with. It ratchets it up bit by bit. But, don't get me wrong, when things go wrong, holy hell can they go wrong? And they do stuff with that
it's still
too.
fucking car racing.
Yeah. So, the other thing I'd point to in this series that stood out to me is that the character designs they do not look like anything else this season.
No, this... I don't know when the source material for this was written. It's clearly a manga to start with. But the character design has a very vintage flavor to it, where you're like, this feels even like, maybe even like pre-70s. Like, you can sort of see it being 60s-y. It's also like, it has a modern feel to it as well, but it feels like a modern interpretation of designs from the 60s. And I'm not saying that's what it is. I don't think that's what it is at all. I think it's the work of someone who loved that.
So here is some fun stuff about the assumptions that were brought to bear in that conversation, because I'm not like, no.
I only made one assumption.
That it used to be a manga?
Oh, well, okay. Yes, I guess.
Because it wasn't.
It wasn't?
No.
The fuck?
This is an original TV series.
Oh, shit.
By Katakawa. This was made by Dwango people. This was something that was like, yeah, this is how this should look right now. And
what's with the character art from the ending being so different?
The character designer is a woman, I think, by the name of Takako Shimura. right? And you might go like, well, what, that name doesn't mean anything to me, right?
That's definitely what I was thinking. I wasn't all thinking Shimura.
Shimura, okay, I apologize. That's fair.
Sorry, that was meant to be a joke. I wasn't trying to be serious at you.
It's fine. I'm just, however, going to mention some of the names of work she's done. Boku wa Onna no Ko.
Okay.
Yes. Shimura is notable for all of her work in LGBT manga.
Okay.
She was born in 1973. Her career started in 1997. She did the designs for this one, but broadly speaking, the stuff she did is things like Sayonara Otoko no Ko and Even Though We're Adults. She's also the character designer for an anime called Aldanoa Zero, if that one rings any bells for you.
Does not.
But yeah, she's really quite good at this stuff. Her character designs look amazing, and if you go looking for more stuff that looks like that, guess what? It's all queer as hell.
Well, that's kind of cool, and this show is not unqueer, but it's definitely not actually queer.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of space to play in.
Oh, the other one you might know is Wandering Sun.
No.
Okay, Wandering Sun is a fairly important manga about a trans girl. Like, not a gender-flopped person, but a trans girl's life growing up. Anyway, so yeah, Overtake looks the way it does because Katakawa reached out to someone and she handed in those character designs.
It also has really, really nice character animation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think greatly to its benefit realizes that because the pivotal moments of the races are still going to be pretty cheap because you've got 3D CG cars on a racetrack.
Yeah.
And that's easy as far as animating shit goes. So the actual, expensive Sakuga moments get poured into the characters getting all emotional and shit. And that's what you want out of a sports anime, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is an anime which uses its 3D perfectly.
And that's also, the essence of our main character's story as well. His whole thing is that he's unable to take photos of people since he was traumatized by the last time he did, which was a very unfortunate... It's enough of an event that the episodes where they depict it have a warning pop up.
A content warning!
Because, I don't know, if you're a Japanese person, you might maybe not want to see depictions of earthquake disasters.
Yeah. Overtake was a shockingly good sports anime of its type. It is a little bit of a bummer in that it's not as joyous as a show like, say, Haikyuu. Like, the highs are not nearly as high, but it's very engaging, very tautly put together. There's no waste anywhere in it.
It's true, but the reason it's not as joyous as Haikyuu is because it only gets one season. The whole season is working towards that first win, because this is a team that are, they're so scrubbed here at the beginning that they have never even come close to the win, really.
One of the things about Formula One racing, which my dad watched a lot while I was growing up, and I watched a lot with him, is that it is a long, protracted experience of tension. There's no excitement or burst of sudden surprise at the end of a match unless someone crashes, unless someone gets hurt, which sucks. But it is this long grind. If you're improving your position, it's by inches at a time, every lap. You are trying to position yourself so that when the other person has to take a break, you are there to capitalize. And you are fighting for single spaces. It's a very, very endurance-heavy sport. And that's interesting.
It's also a story they tell really well with I'm gonna say the B-plot.
Yeah.
Though it's not really a plot as such, but the background of all of this, of our main guys, is the Fancy Rich Kids team, who are sponsored by the manufacturer of race cars, so they have all the primo shit.
Yeah.
And their drivers go to a fancy school and they're on track to be the best. And we are presented with the cool, pretty playboy one, and the serious, angry one with the horrible personality, and how they contrast with one another, and...
The two genders.
Yeah, two genders, useless hedonist, and shitty grumpy guy.
I'm great. My stats are great, but my personality sucks.
And, his personality his personality doesn't really suck, or it sucks in the way that an anime personality is, which is to say he's actually really interesting. Mm-hmm. And probably goes through the most development out of any of the characters. He's the one who has an arc that really solidly ends in a different place to where it starts.
Yeah.
And because the character writing in this show is fucking good, so the Playboy is also way more interesting than he appears to be at first. And the manager of the rich kids team is way more interesting than he appears to be at first. It's just a really well-told story that understands that the way to do that is to make the character writing really good.
Big weakness of Overtake that I would point out is it has 1.5 girls.
It's true. And I do think that the weakest design out of the lot is the teenage girl character.
Yeah.
They do find some interesting stuff for her to do, and she grew on me a little bit, but I just can't stand her design.
Yeah, it's not... It's an interesting thing, because fundamentally, it winds up being a show about men's emotional resonance with other men.
Yes.
And in that regard, it winds up being, like, low-key queer, just because, like, gay.
Yeah.
But...
Look how much these men care about each other, and with such intensity. If you understand that gayness exists, this is kinda gay.
But also with the context of if women were more involved in this space, then they would be parts of those same conversations, in which case a lot of what drives this series, which is a look at how men under tension in the context of games and play relate to one another, would be diminished of suddenly you have a bunch of guys unloading their emotional situations on women, which is less interesting to me. But as a direct result to that, we do get a show with 1.5 girls in it, which is a bit of a bummer.
One of the big problems of sports anime is that because most sports are gender segregated, you get the scenario of, here is your cast of guys who do things and have feelings and have agency, and here are the token girls that have been put in to do nothing but support them.
Yeah.
It's a perpetual issue with these shows, even the best ones, even Haikyuu.
Yeah.
The girls are boring and don't have much to do.
Hey, Your Honor, I will say, you are completely correct, they don't have much to do. Those 2 girls are great. There are 2 of them. That's a bad problem right there.
It is.
But I do think those 2 characters are very enjoyable, and I think the fact that I want to see more of them is probably a sign that they didn't get enough. Anyway.
Yeah.
And
also, the fucking race girl outfit that they have. The change. I assumed they were going to be, like, sexy race girls at least, but they got this weird sort of puffy bloomer thing.
Yeah!
She looks like an old lady and a toddler at the same time, and I hate it.
I kind of love it in the context of knowing that the creator of those character designs is a big queer creator, in that, like... They know how to make hot things, and they didn't, and okay.
Look, I regularly have this disagreement with creators of girl-for-girl content specifically, because I like girls probably more than guys. Like, overall, I like femme, right? I like it a lot when it's on boys in particular, but the aesthetic overall that I enjoy is femme. But, people who write actual lesbians are almost always on a wildly different aesthetic track to me. Like, I do not want to watch Execution, or I do not want to watch fucking Secret Princess Plans. I don't like any of these designs.
Your Honor, objection. The Executioner, Her Way of Life's character designs are stupid.
I'm glad I'm super glad there's actual fucking gay shit coming out. It's so, more of that please, more of it everywhere. But, every time something is actually confirmed queer, I'm like, I wish I wanted to look at it.
Alright. That is the 8 things that we just thought unequivocally, that's good.
Yeah, that's good. One of them has more than a few notes.
Mm-hmm.
But broadly speaking, we would recommend you check out any of these, if they do not, in particular, squick you off.
Yeah, if the vibes ping for you, you should check them out. We are all of this top 8 list, which just to go here at the end, it was 1, Way of the Househusband, 2, Skip and Loafer, 3, Insomniacs After School, 4, Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead, 5.
I don't know, I've lost count. Just keep going.
Spy X Family Season 2, 6, The Apothecary Diaries, 7, Heavenly Delusion, and 8, Overtake. Those were all really good. And now, next time, we're going to get the knives out.
Alright, we're jumping straight to the shit.
Well, no, we're going to play with stuff. We're going to play with our food a little. There's going to be some stuff that's...
We're going to explore the vast quantities of meh.
We're going to start with the autopsy, yeah. You've got to go through the skin before you get to the really squishy parts.
My father told me I was never to mess with dead bodies because I would become way too casual about it.